We see an older warrior tightly gripping his dirtied sword after a tough fight. Then, a soldier from his team looks at the guy with a shocked and sweaty face in disbelief. So, the white-haired guy charges at the enemies, taking them all down without a second thought. Full of determination, the leader shouts for his crew not to stop and to keep pushing forward with all they've got. The war rages on, with many arrows flying and swords clashing everywhere. The place is in total chaos out on the sea, with a bunch of ships on fire on top of the water, and several warriors were lost, now floating in the devastated sea. Meanwhile, a giant fleet of boats approaches, lighting up the dark night of the area. Elsewhere, a very dark and quiet forest is only lit by the light coming from the moon. There, an owl is enjoying the night, eating a piece of meat on a branch, just chilling. But all of a sudden, the animal gets startled, and its eyes go wide at something getting closer. Terrified, the owl flies away in a hurry, leaving its food behind to escape the danger. Soon after, very loud sounds of fast footsteps begin to echo down the dirt path. At that moment, two guys on horseback are galloping at high speed along the trail in the middle of the forest. The two show a lot of urgency and tension on their faces during this whole rush. Finally, the pair reaches the top of a hill and can see a very large military camp. Inside the fort, a guard peeks from behind a curtain with a very sad expression. In there, someone is trying to treat a very serious injury, placing some bandages on the wounded skin. The healer presses a dark paste onto the wound, trying to contain the damage that was done. We find out the injured person is that older general, now lying down and covered in bandages. Just then, two young men enter the tent, super worried, and ask how he is doing now. The oldest son replies, breaking out in a cold sweat, that his father hasn't woken up yet and might not make it. Hearing this, the warrior's nephew gets really upset and frowns with great concern. He complains that the injury should have been treated right away, so it wouldn't have gotten so bad. But the heir explains sadly that the old man was stubborn and wouldn't let anyone mention the wound. Right after, the doctor who was treating the patient comes out from behind the curtains, getting their attention. Desperate, the relatives immediately ask if the commander has shown any signs of improvement. Wiping his face, the doctor just shakes his head and tells them it was all over. The young man stands there, stunned, asking in a weak voice if his father had really passed on. However, the healer trembles nervously and gulps before he can give the real answer. Leaving everyone speechless, the doctor says that the patient actually just woke up. The two warriors are astonished and start to cry, not believing this true miracle. At once, they rush into the room and call out to their leader with a lot of emotion in their voices. Inside, the legendary commander is sitting up firmly in bed, even though he's covered in bandages. This was the exact moment the terrible war that lasted for 7 years finally came to an end. Far away, a giant royal palace stands out against a calm, blue sky in the main city. On the throne, the country's king is carefully reading a super important message he received. He asks his advisor if the news of the great victory at sea is really true. The king scowls and grumbles that even the afterlife seems afraid to take that guy. Hearing this, the official in green gets confused, not getting what his master meant. Quickly covering it up, the king lies, saying the general's passing would be a horrible thing for the country. The servant agrees with him, saying the people would be devastated to lose their great hero. After all, the legendary warrior saved everyone from the invasion and became an idol on the city streets. With that, the advisor suggests that the warrior be promoted for his acts of courage. But the king freaks out with anger and yells, asking if the servant is trying to diminish his power. Trembling with fear, the man bows, trying to explain that the allied troops had the same idea. Unwilling to listen, the emperor raises his hand and orders the man to leave his chamber immediately. The bureaucrat raises his head in complete disbelief at his boss's aggressive attitude. With a very scary look, the king reinforces the order for him to disappear once and for all. Defeated, the official just lowers his head and walks backward out of the great hall. The official in green breaks into a cold sweat upon realizing he praised the commander in front of the king who hates him. Leaving the hall, The servant smacks his own mouth, complaining about always talking too much and getting into trouble. Walking through the courtyard, he tries to convince himself he won't be fired because loyal ministers are rare. Far away, several smoke signals begin to rise from the mountaintops like a big warning. At that moment, the same bureaucrat comes running back, totally desperate and holding out his hand to warn the king. But the king is just chilling, eating a snack, and complains about the sudden intrusion into his personal hall. With wide eyes, the servant ignores the scolding and tearfully announces that a rebellion has started. Hearing this terrible news, the emperor freezes in place and stops eating, completely shocked. The kneeling servant reports that the general's army is marching straight for the temporary palace. Trembling with rage, the leader clenches his fists, saying he always knew the guy would try a coup. Desperate, the servant begs the king to flee, at once to protect his own life from the threat. At that exact moment, the giant doors of the hall swing open, revealing several armed warriors. The advisor looks back, completely terrified, and stammers the famous military leader's name. Then, the powerful white-haired warrior advances into the room with a very angry look on his face. With slow, heavy steps, the intruder walks through the empty hall, heading straight for the king's throne. The king tries to hide his fear, sweating nervously, and lies that he was just about to summon the hero to give him a reward. Ignoring the excuse, the man in red just stares at the king, making the ruler even more afraid. With a deep, scary look, the older general replies dryly that he is not feeling well. He announces that he came to say something important without ceremony, and the cowardly king accepts it all without complaining. The warrior accuses the emperor of being a failure who abandoned his people during the Great Invasion. With a tense smile, the king tries to justify himself, saying he needs the power to fix his mistakes. Losing his patience, the white-haired guy draws his sword and yells that the liar only wants to save himself. The sharp blade stops right near the king's neck, who starts to tremble, begging for forgiveness on the spot. The hero says that even the heavens have abandoned that pathetic leader, and now the people hate him very much. With that, the warrior swings his sword with all his might and says he'll take the throne for the country himself. A sharp scream of pure panic echoes out of the hall, breaking the palace's silence. Then, we see that the king was just dreaming and wakes up in a panic, clutching his neck. Still breathless, he sits up in bed in the dark room, trying to catch his breath after the scare. A guard asks the reason for the scream, and the confused king speaks softly about the attempt on his life. Soon, the king notices no one is in the room and tells the guard to forget what he just heard. The coward curls up in bed, scared to death, and reveals he's lost count of how many nightmares he's had. Full of rage, he blames the general for his trauma, wishing the guy had fallen in battle. Clutching his chest, the king grumbles that he can't even breathe knowing his rival is still alive. With a crazed look, the leader declares that tormenting the king himself like this is already high treason, so he orders his servants to summon the great hero to the palace, and the scene changes to 1 month later. The white-haired man walks through quiet streets with his escort and is happy to see normal life. One of the officers recalls the dark time of 7 years of fighting until they finally achieved peace. The young man praises the elder for saving the country, but the wise man says the victory belongs to the suffering people. Looking at the crowd, the hero guarantees that as long as these good people exist, the nation will thrive. Soon, the group arrives at the castle steps, and the advisors bow, greeting the newcomer. The servant quickly informs him that the emperor is already waiting and asks the guest to enter the great hall. At that, the leader tells his young guards to wait outside while he takes care of politics. Obeying the order, the warriors watch their master walk silently down the corridor with the men. The nice soldier confesses he's worried about the rumors of the king's jealousy toward his father. The king's giant place looks like a desert, with no one walking through those enormous courtyards. Walking through, the servant and the hero arrive at the open door of the throne room, waiting for permission. The warrior notices, through the crack, that the king's big red chair is completely empty. With that, the royal servant asks the older man to wait alone, while he notifies the master. Hurriedly, the man in the suit bows and runs backward down the hall, leaving the military man there. The older man is suspicious of the strange silence and wonders why there are no guards. The older man thinks that he doesn't care about the lack of guards, since he just wants to ask to step down from his position. But suddenly, a guard yells, calling the old warrior a traitor in front of everyone. Surprised, the hero faces the man, asking with an annoyed tone if he wasn't an investigator from the tribunal. Then, the white-haired man asks the reason for the insult and says he only came on the king's orders. Pointing his finger in his face, the official accuses the military man of planning a rebellion for the throne. With a furious look, the man demands that the surrounding guards arrest the criminal at once. Immediately, several soldiers draw their swords and surround the legendary commander from all sides. Even threatened by the blades, the wise man doesn't back down and demands to see the emperor to resolve everything. However, the man in the suit says that will happen anyway and tells him to surrender right away. Without a fight, the elder is tied up by the guards and taken out of the empty hall. Sometime later, night falls on the city, lighting up the dark sky with a big full moon. When the sun rises again, its rays illuminate the rooftops of a large, well-guarded prison. In front of the heavy doors, we see two armed guards watching over the dirt courtyard. One of the guards comments curiously that the new prisoner who arrived at night is no ordinary guy. Scared, his colleague warns that the tribunal has forbidden contact, and they could be done for if they mess around. Gulping, the first guard breaks into a cold sweat, trying to imagine who the guy thrown in the cell could be. Inside, the old hero is sitting on the straw floor and realizes the king really wants to get rid of him. And with a tired look, the warrior complains about the situation, wishing he had gone down fighting for real. He says he doesn't care about his own life, but suffers thinking about what they will do to his wife and daughters. Outside, the king's investigator approaches the bars, making fun of the prisoner's face. The white-haired man looks up, surprised, and recognizes that man as the Grand Prince. Irritated, the military man asks if it was that phony character who filled the king's head with lies. With a little smile, the noble pretends to be offended, saying that people might think he's a villain. Soon, the advisor changes his tone and threatens the warrior, reminding him that he can have his body cut to pieces. The man in purple continues the blackmail, talking about all the hero's relatives and children in danger. Freaking out with rage, the commander promises to curse that guy if anyone touches his family. Unafraid of his anger, the man in the suit calmly says he is there to ensure peace for everyone. But the politician makes it clear that the family's life depends solely on the choice the elder makes. With a wicked smile, the servant warns that the prisoner has little time and needs to decide soon. Satisfied with the torture, the advisor turns his back, saying he has a lot of work to do. The white-haired man gets his attention and asks if admitting to treason will save his family. Looking over his shoulder, the evil man guarantees their safety if the military man accepts the blame. Defeated, the legendary commander closes his eyes, accepting the cruel fate to protect those he loves. The warrior says he accepts the deal, while the bureaucrat smiles victoriously at his manipulation. With a chilling smile, the servant praises the decision, guaranteeing the prisoner a quick end. The wise man sighs in relief, thinking that protecting his own brings him no regrets. Outside, the evil advisor calmly leaves the prison while the guard stands still. Walking in the courtyard, he meets a chubby official who immediately asks about the conversation with the hero. The man in the suit reveals the forced confession, leaving his colleague relieved they didn't have to use force. Seizing the moment, the servant in purple orders the soldiers to fetch the traitor's family. With a sadistic face, the man orders the children to be exiled and the woman enslaved, following the king. Sweating nervously, the chubby official bows, accepting the terrible order without a second thought. At once, the group of subordinates runs across the dirt courtyard to carry out the mission. Alone, the man in purple laughs at the general, finding the plea for mercy he made amusing. With a dark smile, the villain declares that the hero will vanish from history and become nothing but trash. The day of the execution arrives, and we see the old warrior kneeling in the center of a military courtyard. The great savior of the nation has his hands locked in a wooden stock, staring at a dark bowl. Above him, the cowardly king watches the scene, sitting on his throne with a completely empty look on his face. The evil servant stands next to the prisoner and begins to read the false crimes aloud. Reading the paper, he announces that the king has shown mercy, and so the hero will have to drink the poison. The evil servant asks with a smile if the condemned man has anything to say before passing on. The old wise man keeps his eyes closed and accepts his cruel fate in complete silence. With that, the man in the suit states that he must drink the liquid, since he doesn't want to say anything. Then, the advisor makes fun of him, saying he's already arranged everything and his family won't suffer. The white-haired man looks up with a dark expression and thanks him for his words. Then the hero raises the bowl, preparing to swallow the deadly drink and end it all. The man in purple smiles sadistically, enjoying the sight of the great warrior completely humiliated. The cowardly king continues to watch the scene from above, without showing a single drop of remorse. But suddenly, a guard comes running and tells the commander not to drink that under any circumstances. Surprised, the older man recognizes the face of the servant who always took care of things at his house. Crying, the servant reveals that the children were exiled and the women were made slaves of the government. Hearing the cruel truth, the old warrior freezes in shock, gripping the bowl very tightly. Desperate, the phony politician points his finger and orders the soldiers to stop that guy at once. Quickly, the guards pin the poor man to the dirt ground as he defends his master. The general kneels with great anger and shouts the evil advisor's name, demanding an explanation. With a look full of hatred, the legendary hero understands he's been played for a fool the whole time. The king in the suit states from above that rebellion is a crime also paid for by the traitor's children. Oh, tragedy. The old man swears he never planned anything against the throne and only fought to protect the country. The useless emperor just asks why he confessed his guilt a little while earlier. Angrily, the white-haired man says he only took the blame to save the ones he loved and wants a trial. The king loses his patience, stating that everything is already decided and tells him to drink his demise. Without backing down, the wise man says he won't accept this and throws the bowl of poison on the ground. The rebellious act leaves the king completely shocked, with his eyes wide with surprise. At that, the advisor draws his blade, calling the old man a wretch for disobeying the order. But using the wooden stock on his hands, the hero easily hits the servant in the stomach. The villain falls to the ground complaining of pain as his sharp weapon slides across the dirt. With agility, the commander picks up the weapon from the ground, showing he's still a great warrior. Scared, the coward crawls back and asks them to resolve things in a normal way. With a terrifying face, the older man says that just getting rid of one parasite won't save the country. The soldier then advances angrily, declaring that the one truly responsible for the ruin is the king himself. Seeing his end approaching, the king panics and orders the guards to stop that madman. Quickly, an imperial soldier runs toward the hero, holding a very large spear, but with just one swing of his sword, the old warrior clears the obstacle from his path. The older man runs to the throne, yelling that he doesn't care about his life as long as his family lives. Raising his weapon, he calls the man a false leader for only caring about his own power. However, before the final blow, a light flashes, indicating that something very fast hit his back. The white-haired man feels a sharp pain piercing his body, greatly slowing him down. Gritting his teeth, the hero tries to ignore the cowardly attack and focuses on finishing his goal. But an entire squad of archers already has their weapons aimed at the old soldier. With no chance to defend himself, dozens of arrows strike the wise man, ending all hope. The legendary warrior lets out a cry of pain, feeling his strength fading away for good. Pain takes over his body as he falls, defeated, in the palace courtyard in a tragic way. Suddenly, a boy wakes up startled in a bed and wonders if that was all just a dream. Outside, a voice announces that it snowed a lot and asks the young master to come out of the room for a bit. With that, the wooden door opens slowly, revealing the outside to the confused boy. The young man calmly observes the yard where a servant is sweeping the dirt and says he slept well. The long-haired young man stares at the employee, still a bit lost from his recent delusions. He looks up and watches the beautiful blossoms falling from the large tree in the morning sky. At this moment, the calm place is revealed to be the great province of Chungcheong in the month of May. The boy sits on the porch, thinking to himself that he keeps having that same terrible dream. The young man thinks worriedly that everything he sees in these dreams always ends up becoming reality. Sitting on the porch, he wonders how he's going to explain this, and even doubts if he's really alive. With his head aching, the boy doesn't understand why these visions always cause so much trouble. Then he remembers the bizarre nightmare from the previous night, afraid that it might also happen. Panicking, the long-haired boy almost goes crazy, not knowing whether to trust the visions or not. Suddenly, the servant approaches with a broom and says that he should indeed believe in them. The servant tries to cheer up his master, saying that a man without great ambitions is like a dead man. While the old man celebrates excitedly, the boy just sighs, wishing the dream was that good. With a focused look, the young man decides to see everything with his own eyes to try to prevent the tragedy. Later, night falls over the village, and we see the roof of a very quiet house. The moonlight illuminates the large, empty yard, showing that everyone must already be asleep. Inside one of the rooms, we can see a person resting soundly in their comfortable bed. This bald man is sleeping heavily, with no idea what's about to happen outside. In the yard, two armed guys are talking in the shadows, confirming that this is the right target. One of them, dressed as a monk, moves forward with a staff, asking what's taking so long. The other intruder says he might give in on some things, but he never backs down when a woman is involved. Hiding in the dark, the protagonist observes the bandits and confirms his nightmare was real. Afraid of a noise, the woman, Snatcher, asks who is approaching in the dark. The boy steps out of the shadows wearing a blue cloak, staring at the criminals with a very cold look. With a little smile, the long-haired boy realizes his ambush plan worked perfectly. Thinking the boy is also a bandit, the intruder tells him to scram because they got there first. Keeping his cool, the young man warns the two intruders that they should get out of there before things get worse. Annoyed by the kid's audacity, the thief grabs his staff and threatens to teach him a lesson. Without wasting time, the big guy leaps with the wooden weapon to smash the protagonist's head. But being much more agile, the young man ducks and lands a strong kick, deflecting the guy's attack. The blow is so strong that the bandit loses his balance and ends up falling on his back on the dirt ground. Very annoyed by the humiliation, the criminal gets up and says now he's going to play for real. He then holds the staff with both hands and spins the weapon, revealing a hidden trick. Pulling the wood, the man draws a sharp blade and shows that his weapon was a sword. The protagonist's eyes widen in surprise upon seeing that the enemy has some very dangerous tricks. Analyzing his rival's stance, the young man realizes he's using a Japanese sword technique. He concludes that the invaders disguise themselves as civilians to spy on the villages before the attacks. Shouting the name of his attack, the fake thief charges with the gleaming blade ready to strike. With a swift move, the bandit attempts a slash, but the long-haired boy ducks at the last second. Sweating nervously, the enemy is shocked to see that a mere kid managed to dodge the blow. Seizing the opening, the protagonist quickly pulls out a dagger that was hidden in his clothes. With a firm pull, he reveals the short blade, showing he didn't come to the fight empty-handed either. The big guy's eyes widen in panic when he sees the deadly glint of the weapon in the boy's hand. Desperate, the invader raises his sword, claiming that his weapon was still much faster. But in that same instant, a bright flash crosses the screen, showing the precision of the young man's attack. The impact sends sparks flying as the boy's small knife perfectly blocks the sword. Holding the defense firmly, the protagonist faces the villain, proving that size doesn't matter. Then, the boy pushes the steel aside and lands a powerful elbow strike to his rival's face. The bandit spits blood, feeling his nose break from that violent and precise impact. Giving no chance to recover, the young man leaps into the air and tells the enemy to blame his nightmares. With a lethal move, the short blade strikes the criminal's chest, ending the fight instantly. The fake thief's heavy body falls backward onto the dirt as the boy takes a deep breath after the fight, sighing in relief. The long-haired boy relaxes his stance, thankful for having prevented the invasion. But suddenly, his gaze freezes as he realizes he missed a detail from his vision. Looking over his shoulder, he remembers that there was actually one more bandit hiding nearby. The young man peeks into the window, hearing strange noises coming from the other house on the large property. Inside, a bald man takes off his clothes and admires a woman sleeping peacefully in bed. But suddenly, the man hears a faint creak coming from the door of his dark room. Annoyed, the brute complains, thinking his partner came into the room at the wrong time. However, upon turning around, the intruder comes face to face with the young warrior standing right at the entrance. Completely shocked, the big guy stammers, wanting to know who this mysterious intruder is. Keeping his cool, the long-haired boy asks for silence and suggests they settle things outside peacefully. The bandit just stares at the boy in silence, trying to understand what is happening there. Soon after, the man follows the boy to the dark courtyard, walking with very heavy steps. Then, the big guy curses his ally for letting a stranger invade the place so easily. But suddenly, the intruder's eyes widen in absolute and terrifying shock. He notices his partner's body lying on the dirt ground, right behind the mysterious young man. The disguised bandit has been completely defeated and can no longer move a single muscle. Sweating nervously, the bald man asks with a trembling voice if the boy was responsible for all of this. The hero turns his back and states with certainty that those criminals don't deserve to live. Full of rage, the villain threatens to cut the boy into pieces to feed to the fish later. Casting a deadly glare, the protagonist warns that they will soon see who ends up taken down. With that, the brute draws a longsword and says he is much stronger than his friend. Shouting in hatred, the criminal charges, delivering a brutal strike with his very sharp blade. Quickly, the young man blocks the impact with his dagger, sending large sparks flying into the air. The heavy enemy weapon slices through the air, very close to the super fast warrior's face. Showing his agility, the young man dodges at the last second, escaping what would have been a fatal blow. Then, the big guy mocks the hero's small knife, saying his own reach is greater. Taking advantage, the villain makes a wide swing, forcing the boy to jump backward. Even while dodging, the swift attack ends up, causing a grazing cut on the boy's shoulder. With a wicked smile, the enemy claims he almost managed to take his arm off. Rising the sword once more, the man guarantees he won't make the same mistake again. Analyzing his rival, the protagonist realizes he's going to lose his head if he doesn't fight seriously. The two fighters face each other in the silent courtyard, thinking about their next move in the fight. The bald man grips the handle of his weapon with an expression full of great frustration on his face. Meanwhile, the young man holds his dagger tightly, thinking of a way to overcome this disadvantage. The boy knows that in a tough fight, small chances decide who will come out victorious. He understands that the person with the bigger weapon ends up dictating the entire pace of the dangerous combat. Knowing this, the long-haired boy concludes that he needs just one single opening to turn the tables. Without wasting time, the villain attacks again, swinging the sword in a very aggressive way. An intense exchange of strikes and blocks begins to light up the courtyard in the dark night. The enemy taunts the young man, telling him to attack instead of just constantly defending himself. Then, the brute leaps, delivering a vertical slash while the boy dodges underneath. The hero admits that just running from the sword's reach will surely make him lose the fight. With a focused look, the boy decides there's only one way to end this confrontation. Gathering his courage, the young man charges forward with everything he has to try and get close to his large target. Surprised by the charge, the big guy hesitates upon seeing his rival running toward him. Quickly, the bald man retreats and tries to push the boy away, denying any chance of a hit. With that, the criminal jumps back, maintaining a large distance while trying to slice his rival. However, the clever hero reveals that he had already calculated his exact escape route beforehand. Laughing, the villain calls that nonsense, thinking the boy was just bluffing, but suddenly, the man's eyes go wide as he feels his back hit something very hard. Sweating in panic, the bandit realizes he's been cornered against the stone wall. Taking advantage of the small slip up, the hero leaps and delivers a swift strike with his sharp dagger. A strong flash cuts through the air, ending the battle against the great swordsman once and for all. The brute lets out a scream of agonizing pain as his chest is pierced by the young man's blade. Trembling with rage, the bandit promises to get the boy as he falls defeated on the dirt ground. With a heavy thud, the big man collapses lifelessly at the feet of the victorious young warrior. The boy thinks about his bizarre dream, where outside invaders secretly entered the village. In that dark vision, the young lady of the house gave up on living after being attacked. But thankfully, now the woman sleeps peacefully in her bed as if nothing bad had happened. With a slight smile, the hero celebrates, relieved to have been able to change that cruel fate. The next morning, the sun once again illuminates the large courtyard of the house, chasing away the darkness. While writing at his desk, the boy realizes that these nightmares are a great mission. He notes that the enemy attacks are getting worse and hurting innocent people. With a focused look, the long-haired boy decides he will be the one to stop all these invaders. Just then, a servant enters the room, curious about what his master was writing so intently. The older man presses the boy, wanting to know where he had been in the middle of the night. Hearing that his mother visited his room at night, the young man freezes in fear and breaks into a cold sweat. But the employee reassures the boy, stating that he made up a good excuse to protect him. Despite this, the servant maintains a serious posture and demands a real explanation from his master. Hiding it well, the protagonist lies and says he only left the house to visit an old cousin. The old man ignores the answer and reveals, shocked, that 2 thieves from out of town invaded the village. Pretending not to know anything, the young man puts on an expression of great shock and surprise. The employee takes a deep breath, feeling relieved that someone mysterious took care of the bandits. Soon, the old man kicks the air, promising to protect the boy, who just smiles, finding it amusing. Calmer now, the employee asks the young man to at least let him know before disappearing from home next time. Ending the conversation, the man gives a slight bow and says he needs to get back to work. He turns his back and starts walking across the dirt yard before stopping and remembering something. Looking over his shoulder, the employee asks if the long-haired boy has heard the new rumors in the village. The scene cuts to a large sign hanging outside a very bustling shop. Down below, an angry customer is arguing fiercely with the owner of the place over a small debt. The man guarantees he'll be back in a few days with a lot of money to pay everything he owes for good. But the woman doesn't fall for it and pulls on his clothes, demanding to be paid for what was drunk. Losing his patience, the deadbeat shoves the old lady hard and tells her to shut up. The bandits' friends just watch the scene and spit on the ground, complaining about their bad luck. However, at the exact moment the aggressor tries to leave, someone sticks a foot out in front of him. Unable to stop, the deadbeat trips hard and plants his face right in the dirty ground. Trembling with rage, the aggressor gets up with a bloody nose and wants to know who the wise guy was. The one responsible for the trip is a confident boy who starts making fun of his lack of money. Recognizing the boy, the deadbeat grits his teeth and sweats with a look of pure hatred. Just then, the troublemaker's giant partner calmly approaches and asks the reason for the commotion. Ignoring the tense atmosphere, the big guy just stares at the newly arrived young man and tells him to pay the debt. The other friend in the group points his finger and threatens the boy, demanding he pay the whole bill. Seeing the collector's firm attitude, the deadbeat gets a little scared, not understanding his courage. Suddenly, a beautiful metallic sound echoes as several gold coins are tossed onto the dirt. The big guy grumbles and hands over the money while trying to understand what craziness was happening. With their tails between their legs, the 3 brutes turn their backs and start to leave the bar. But the gang leader's eyes go wide, getting a huge shock when he notices a sinister detail. The young collector casts a deadly and threatening glare that would give anyone the chills. Trembling with terror, the big guy hurries his friends along, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. With a smug smile, the boy waves goodbye to the scared deadbeat mockingly. Far away, the partners make fun of the big guy's fear and ask who the feared kid is. His friend tries to guess if the boy was the son of some important local politician. The big guy then reveals that the boy is tough because he's always lived freely, being an illegitimate son. At that, a boy with a red headband thinks seriously about the dangers of messing with that kid. Then he tells the lady by his side to at least stay for dinner before she leaves. With a firm look, the man states that she should focus on eating well and taking care of her mother. But without waiting for an answer, the young man turns his back and walks across the yard, leaving the girl behind. At that moment, the boy with the headband's eyes go wide, getting a little startled by something. Soon, a little girl comes running anxiously down the dirt road, calling the tall man's name. The girl arrives tired and out of breath, while the young man questions the reason for all the shouting. With that, the little girl gets closer and starts whispering a big secret in the young man's ear. Surprised by the gossip, he questions if it's real, and the girl swears she saw it with her own eyes. Breaking into a cold sweat, the man gets confused, trying to understand why someone would suddenly start training. Far away, we see a beautiful bamboo forest illuminated by the afternoon sun's rays. In the middle of the trees, the young hero trains with his sword, remembering his people's suffering. Driven by determination, the long-haired boy swings his blade and repeats that he needs to get much stronger. He executes a powerful strike in the air and states that this is the only way to protect his family. With a cry of rage, the warrior attacks with all his might, wanting to prove he is different from the leaders. Completely focused, the young man swears to himself that he will surpass all limits and be unbeatable. Later, the young man walks calmly, leading his horse during a beautiful sunset. But suddenly, the warrior stops walking and looks to the side, somewhat surprised by something. Then, he spots a small servant girl slowly approaching on the dirt path in the forest. Getting closer, the girl bows respectfully and greets the great hero politely. The young man questions the visit, and the little servant informs him that her lady asked her to deliver a letter. Holding the paper, the hero recognizes the handwriting and confirms the message came from his beloved Manhwa. Reading the message, the warrior discovers that the beautiful young woman has something very important to say. The little girl informs him that her mistress is waiting near the hill, and the young man accepts the invitation. Far away, a beautiful young woman waits patiently at the top of a hill with flowers and a tree. Soon, the little servant climbs the hill, guiding the young warrior to the meeting spot. With their arrival, the beautiful woman turns her head and gives a gentle smile, thanking her for the favor. The hero approaches suspiciously and wants to know the reason for the urgent and unannounced meeting. With a sad look, the young woman lowers her head and reveals that things have taken a terrible turn. The beautiful girl confesses with great pain in her heart that her father has forbidden their relationship. Keeping his cool, the long-haired boy agrees and states that disobeying their parents would ruin their honor. With a slight smile, the hero says they weren't born to be together and promises he will miss her. But the young woman turns completely red with anger and yells, asking if the young man has always been so cold. Furious, she demands a reaction from the warrior, finding it absurd that he accepts the breakup so easily. Startled by the scolding, the young man is confused and questions if there's another way out of the problem. Calmer now, the girl explains that her father doesn't hate the young man, he just doesn't want to mix families. Hopefully, she suggests an old custom where the groom abandons his own clan and lives with his wife. Hearing this, the warrior panics, shocked by the crazy idea of giving up his family name. Ignoring her beloved's shock, the girl demands that he think carefully about the proposal and give a quick answer. Still a bit dazed, the hero sighs deeply and promises to evaluate the situation carefully before deciding. Soon, the young man says goodbye and starts heading down the hill, leading his horse with a mind full of doubts. The beautiful young woman and her little servant just watch the warrior leave, hoping for a happy ending. Walking thoughtfully, the young man laments the dilemma, knowing that any choice will bring pain to someone. Suddenly, in the middle of the isolated trail, someone starts yelling the hero's name desperately. Caught by surprise, the long-haired boy holds the animal's reins and turns his head to understand the commotion. He then recognizes the boy with the red headband running hastily toward him with the little girl. The man says breathlessly that he searched the entire training center, and the warrior says he was just heading back. Confused by the answer, the friend questions his path, since the warrior's house is in the other direction. Covering up the situation, the hero lies that he ran into someone, and his friend believes the excuse. Changing the subject, the boy with the headband asks seriously if the warrior saw the new poster there. The hero remembers the poster and gets a very serious and thoughtful expression on his face. The scene cuts to the front of a building, where several people are gathered around a notice. On a poster on the wall, there is an official announcement about a military exam that will take place. In the crowd, someone says they can't read and asks what is written on that paper. The text reveals the date and location for the first part of the region's major military exam. With this, the friend with the headband states, that's why the young man started training so hard. The warrior then remembers a moment on his horse, wondering if he had been reborn. Then, he has a vision of himself in another life, being struck down by arrows in his back. The young man wonders if he was actually having spiritual dreams about his future. In any case, he couldn't believe it, so his horse bolts at high speed. Right after, the hero starts riding very fast through the forest to test something. Without wasting time, he readies his bow and arrow while continuing to ride the animal. With total concentration, the young warrior aims at a very distant target among the trees. The arrow hits its target dead on, showing that his training has paid off. Lost in thought, he decided to see the event from his nightmare with his own eyes. A large group of men walks towards a huge gate of a very old temple. In the courtyard, several candidates gather, forming long lines for the opening ceremony. That event was the military exam the protagonist saw in his premonition dream. If the vision is real, he would fall off his horse in the first phase and be failed on the spot. Countless soldiers line up in the courtyard before three important army officials. Commander Yunjik Sun announces that this year's exam will be divided into 6 disciplines. The tests include wooden and iron bow, short bow and mounted archery, mounted spear, and even polo. Anyone who doesn't reach the required score in any of them will be eliminated immediately. To be brief, the commander officially declares the start of the great military exam. A soldier strikes a wooden gong very hard, announcing the beginning of the first test. The first test is archery, and several candidates position themselves on the firing line. One of the proctors shouts and tells the first group of archers to get ready to start shooting. With bows in hand, the candidates get ready and aim at the distant targets on the field. At the official's signal, the first arrow is fired and cuts through the air at high speed. The wooden projectile hits the center of the boar target dead on with a dull thud. A man raises a red flag and announces that the archer scored 7 points in the test. Soon after, the next group gets ready and shoots their arrows toward the targets. But one of the young men has poor form, and the bowstring ends up snapping hard against his arm. Because of this, his arrow loses all its force and ends up falling to the ground, far from its target. Embarrassed, the boy hears the proctor announce that he failed and was eliminated from the test. Sitting on the grass, the other candidates laugh at the boy who ended up failing. The proctor calls the next participant to the firing line to continue the evaluation. The hero watches intently as a new archer approaches his shooting position. Walking with confidence, the man in the brown headband prepares to take his shot. He gives an arrogant smile, showing that he is very confident in his great skill in the test. His group prepares to shoot with him in the first part of the archery test. The man shoots his arrow with perfect form and a look of great determination. The wooden arrow flies through the air with impressive force in front of everyone there. The shot is so powerful that the projectile flies over all the targets on the field. The proctor raises the red flag and shouts that the candidate passed the test. Impressed, The other guys comment that the arrow flew more than 250 bow. One of them calculates that because of the distance, he will get at least 2 extra points. The protagonist just watches the scene with a very serious and focused expression on his face. Without delay, the confident archer fires his second arrow with the same force as before. Again, the projectile flies far, passing the targets and landing in the grass many meters ahead. The archer in brown celebrates his shot by clenching his fist while the others get ready. Other guys comment that the man's archery is very impressive and above average. One of them reveals that the archer's name is Joe Yu. One but doesn't know if he was ever in the military. A friend bets that the candidate will place first in their group, no doubt. But an older man interrupts, saying that candidate is already out of the test. Confused, the other guys question how the skilled archer could be eliminated. The older man explains that his form is wrong and full of very careless movements. One of the guys retorts that it doesn't matter if he has good aim in the end. The older man remains silent, thinking, while the protagonist observes everything from a distance. With that, everyone's attention returns to the shooting range, where the archer is preparing. The proctor gives the order, and the man's third arrow is fired with incredible force. One of the spectators gets excited by the scene and praises the young man's powerful launch. However, the older man disagrees, stating that the arrow's flight arc is too high. The scene shows the arrow climbing too high in the blue sky with white clouds in the background. Suddenly, the projectile loses force and begins to fall, making a very strange curve. The watching candidates are completely shocked and don't understand what they just saw. With that, the arrow ends up landing in the dirt well, before getting near the wooden target. The proctor raises a white flag and announces that the shot was worth only 5 points. Annoyed with the result, the archer grits his teeth and starts to sweat with frustration. Seeing the scene, the experienced old man murmurs that everything happened exactly as he predicted. With his fists clenched in anger, the man walks away from the firing line, completely defeated. The proctor then announces the next candidate, and the hero faces it all with determination. When it's his turn, the young man in blue walks with his group to the wooden platform. All 4 archers get into position and begin to ready their bows at the same time. With a focused look, the hero draws the bowstring and aims at his target with great precision. Watching from afar, the old man praises the young man's form, comparing it to a blooming flower. Following the proctor's order, the warrior releases the arrow with a perfect and elegant stance. The wooden projectile flies through the air in a straight and precise trajectory toward the target. The arrow hits one of the spinning targets dead on, right in the middle of the red cloth. Since the tips are not iron, they don't pierce the target and only hit it with force. The proctor beats a drum and announces that the shot was clean, worth 7 points in total. The guys who doubted the old man are left speechless by the protagonist's performance. The older man realizes the young man had the strength to shoot farther and get extra points. The others wonder why he held back on purpose and threw away that advantage. The proctor raises the red flag once more and yells for the group to get ready. Calmly, the young warrior raises his wooden bow for the second shot of the test. Then he pulls the string back, concentrating fully to hit the target again. At the signal, the hero releases the arrow with the same form and determination as the first shot. Once again, the round-tipped projectile flies in a straight line, cutting through the air very fast. The shot hits the cloth target dead on with a strong and precise impact right in the center. With another beat of the drum, the proctor announces another clean hit for the young warrior. Jaw dropped, the experienced man can't believe the young man hit the bullseye again. The other candidates are shocked by the mysterious rival's flawless performance. With bow in hand, the hero prepares for the third and final shot of that round. Suddenly, a gentle breeze begins to rustle the leaves of the trees on the shooting range. The old man notices the strong wind and wonders if it will mess up the boy's aim. Seeing the gust, the arrogant archer gives a wicked smile, hoping for his rival's mistake. But the young man in blue remains calm and focused, aiming at the target despite the wind. He analyzes the salty air and the strength of the wind blowing from the northwest to adjust his shot. The red flags on the stone wall wave strongly, showing the gusty wind in the area. Completely focused, the hero prepares to release his last arrow of the test. With a quick and precise movement, the young man fires the projectile, which shines brightly. The arrow flies through the air, making a strange curve due to the strong gust of wind. The spectators shout that the shot was too high and veered to the side of the target, but the experienced old man notices that the young man lowered his aim on purpose to compensate. The arrow continues its curved trajectory through the sky, looking like it will miss the target by a mile. Confused, the candidates wonder how the arrow was making that crazy movement. Someone then realizes that the wind was actually carrying and guiding the projectile. With a perfect curve, the arrow changes direction and hits the target dead. Once again, the other competitors are left speechless, not believing that young man's skill. The older man praises the young man, saying he read the wind and trusted the breeze to guide the shot. He states that this is a master's technique, capable of piercing a leaf from 100 paces away. The proctor beats the drum for the third time, confirming the candidate's perfect hit. The guys comment that even so, the other archer still has an advantage because of the bonus points. Everyone watches the protagonist's group leave the platform after finishing the test. The arrogant archer faces his rival with a smile and says the competition just got more fun. The hero just stares back with a serious and determined look, without saying a word. The scene shows the new target for the second phase, which is a wooden board with a red circle. A proctor announces that the next test will be with short arrows and the rules are the same. Unlike normal ones, these arrows are small and shot using a bamboo tube. The official then calls candidate number 270, one to start the test. Far away, two high-ranking officials walk and talk through the exam courtyard. One of them comments that the level this year is high and mentions Jo Ji Won's good performance. The other official repeats the candidate's name, seeming to recognize it from somewhere famous. His colleague explains that Ji Won is a former soldier who earned merit in battle but retired. The scene cuts to a short arrow, hitting the red target of the second phase dead on. The archer scored 30 points on each shot, totaling 90, and hitting all of them. The official points to the skilled archer and shows him to his superior at the location. The commander comments that his form is different from the others. As expected of a soldier, he bets that Ji Won will be the overall first place, and his subordinate agrees. So the two decide to take a look at the other groups to evaluate more candidates. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a hit and turn their heads toward the noise. Far away, they spot candidate 310 preparing for the second shot. With a swift move, the hero shoots his short arrow, which flies like a beam of light. The projectile hits the center of the wooden target dead on with impressive precision. The commander asks if that man hit twice, and his servant confirms it right away. The leader says that with so many candidates, it's hard to remember them all just by their number. But the aide remembers that he is Yi Sun Sin, the second-place finisher from the first phase. Surprised, the commander reveals that his family hasn't had a military tradition for a long time. That's why he finds it impressive that a man with no formal training shoots so well. Once again, the officials are impressed to see another dead on hit from the young man. The other candidates comment on the young man hitting all 3 shots without a single miss. Curious, the commander says he really wants to see how the rivalry between the two will end. One of the colleagues congratulates the hero on passing, and he replies that it was just luck. From a distance, Ji Won stares at his rival and realizes he is determined to go all the way. The third round of the military exam begins, featuring archery with iron-tipped arrows. A candidate complains about the arrow's weight before shooting with difficulty at the distant target. After a few shots, the proctor announces that Ji Won passed with 24 points. Right after, the protagonist is also approved with the same score as his great rival. With that, the fourth phase begins, which is mounted archery, and the first horse takes off. An archer rides at high speed while preparing to shoot at his target. With great difficulty, the man draws the bowstring, trying to aim while the horse is running. But when he shoots, he completely loses his balance and starts to fall from the moving animal. With a dull thud, the candidate hits the dirt ground hard and ends up being eliminated. The proctor announces the disqualification, and the young man laments the difficulty of shooting while mounted. The experienced old man explains that you need to lean your body forward to avoid falling. Next, Jiu-1 rides with perfect form, showcasing his great skill. His arrow hits the target dead on, making the experienced man praise his technique. With a strong impact, the projectile pierces the wood in the center of the red circle. The other candidates recognize the former soldier's talent and wonder about the hero. Soon after, Yi-sun Sin rides with the same mastery and confidence as his adversary. He draws the bowstring and aims at the target with an elegant and very precise stance. With a quick movement, the young man releases the arrow, which flies toward its objective. The shot hits the side of the target, but still counts as a valid hit for the test. The guys comment that the competition is tight, with the top two finishers tied. Without delay, the fifth phase begins and Jiu-1 is called for the mounted spear test. At the proctor's signal, the horseman charges at high speed toward the straw targets. In this test, candidates need to hit 6 training dummies to earn points. The hit only counts if the spear tip pierces the dummy without using slashing strikes. If the participant doesn't hit at least one of the 6 targets, they are eliminated on the spot. Jiu-1 hits the first dummy with a precise and strong blow, showing his experience. Next, he pierces the second target with the same ease and continues the course. The proctor announces that he hit 4 targets and passed with a total of 20 points. The other candidates are impressed, as 4 hits was the highest score. Right after, the proctor calls Yi-sun Sin for his attempt in the spear test. Jiu-1 stares at his rival as he gets ready at the starting line with his horse. The former soldier warns that this test is difficult and that one fall will eliminate him from the competition. With the spear in hand, the hero positions himself at the starting line and waits for the proctor's signal. The man yells to begin, and the protagonist takes off with his horse at high speed. Counting the targets, the young warrior rides with determination and full focus on his mission. With a swift move, he hits the first straw dummy without any difficulty. Next, he pierces the second target with the same precision as his experienced rival. Jiu-1 watches the scene with a confident smile, thinking he would only hit 2, but to everyone's surprise, the hero hits the third target with a powerful blow. Shocked, the former soldier can't believe he heard the sound of his rival's third hit. Without stopping, the protagonist hits the 4th straw dummy, tying the other's score. The spectators comment that with one more hit, the young man would take the lead in the exam. One of them says he can't see the rider clearly because of the horse's speed, but another points out that the candidate is holding onto the side of the animal to avoid falling. The scene shows the hero hanging sideways on the horse while continuing the difficult course. He remembers the dream where he fell and decides to get closer to the target to avoid losing his balance. Shouting with determination, the hero finds an answer and attacks with his spear outstretched. With a dead-on strike, he pierces the 5th straw dummy, surpassing his great rival. The spectators celebrate the move and realize the young man is about to take first place. At the end of the test, an official congratulates the candidates for coming so far, but he warns that only 25 of them can advance to the final phase of the exam. The commander explains that the last test of the first stage is usually a polo match. However, he announces that after a discussion, they decided to switch the test for a new challenge. The candidates whisper, confused about the sudden and unexpected change in the exam. The final test will be hand-to-hand combat with short weapons against real soldiers. Shocked, the guys shout in disbelief that they will have to fight against active military personnel. While everyone panics, the protagonist faces the news with a very calm look. The commander points and warns that the soldiers behind them will be their opponents. The candidates look back, still unable to believe what was happening. A group of experienced soldiers stares at the young men with a serious and intimidating expression. The competitors are terrified at the idea of facing real warriors. One of the guys laments and tells himself that his great challenge ends right there. The older man agrees and gives up, saying he doesn't stand a chance with a sword. He says goodbye, and the others wish good luck, rooting for those who decided to continue. In a large courtyard, the rules are explained, and the fights will use wooden swords. The winner gets 45 points, and anyone who loses or ties within 23 minutes is eliminated. The guys complain upon learning that a tie also results in direct elimination from the test. The proctor then calls Candidate 17 and Soldier 1 for the first fight of the day. The two opponents face each other in the middle of the dirt arena, prepared for combat. The soldier holds his wooden sword with a confident look and a firm stance. The candidate, however, seems nervous, but keeps his guard up to not falter in the fight. With a shout, the young man charges forward and delivers the first attack of the tense match. The experienced soldier easily blocks the young candidate's sequence of blows. Desperate, the young man tries to attack again with all his strength, but with no success. Calmly, the soldier prepares to counter, attack, and end the fight once and for all. He dodges the blow and blocks the young man's attack with his training's sword. With a swift move, the soldier disarms the candidate, who is left completely defenseless. Tired, the young man realizes the huge difference in level between him and a real soldier. The soldier arrogantly asks if his opponent still has any tricks up his sleeve. Sweating nervously, the candidate is speechless, just staring at his powerful adversary. The soldier announces he's going to end it and charges forward with a finishing blow. With a sequence of attacks, the soldier hits the young man squarely, who cries out in pain. The young man loses his balance and starts stumbling backward, unable to defend himself. With a dull thud, the candidate falls to the dirt ground, completely defeated in the arena. The soldier points his sword and announces that his opponent has been eliminated from the competition. Far away, Ju-won smiles, thinking that now the exam has become really interesting. The protagonist observes his rival, wondering where all that confidence to fight comes from. Suddenly, one of the proctors approaches and asks if he is candidate Jo Ji-won. The man informs him that there is an important person who would very much like to speak with him now. The proctor asks the young man to follow him if he is curious to know who called for him. Meanwhile, in the arena, candidate 55 is also defeated and eliminated. Soon after, candidate 62 loses his fight and says goodbye to the military exam. The officials worry about so many defeats and wonder how they will choose the 25. But the commander reassures them, saying the spots can be filled based on their scores. He decides to wait and see if any of the candidates could pull off a miracle and win. More candidates continue to be eliminated one after another by the experienced soldiers. The scene cuts to one of the buildings at the exam site, where Ji-won is following the proctor. The young man thinks he can't go far because he could be called to fight at any moment. Arriving at the location, a man with his back turned asks if the former soldier still remembers him. Upon turning around, Ju-won recognizes the man's face and is surprised by the reunion. The man introduces himself as Oh-dong Chu and says he served with him on the border. With a smile, Ji-won states that he could never forget his old companion. The old colleague confesses that everyone regretted letting him go. He explains that everyone in the squad owed the young man a great debt of gratitude, but Ji-won asks him to forget it, saying he has already left all that behind for good. The former soldier reveals that he doesn't regret what he did, even though it cost him his position. The friend then changes the subject and wishes the young man good luck for the rest of the exam. Ji-won thanks him for the support and prepares to return to the combat arena. Suddenly, he stops walking and looks back as if he remembered something. The former soldier asks if his friend is one of the oldest among the soldiers there. With a smile, the man confirms and asks if the young man needs any favors from him. Ji-won reveals that he has a favor to ask because there is someone who is bothering him. He says that with his friend's help, he can finally get a great weight off his shoulders. Far away, the officials comment that they are eager to see Ju-won's fight. With his sword in hand, the former soldier enters the arena, ready for his final combat. The proctor authorizes the start of the fight, and the two opponents face each other in the center of the courtyard. With a leap, Ju-1 attacks with everything he has, and the soldier defends with his wooden sword. The soldier spins and tries a counter-attack, but the candidate is faster and dodges. The two exchange blows in the air, showing they are at the same level of skill and strength. The former soldier blocks a powerful attack and prepares to retaliate with another blow. The soldier is surprised by the young man's movements and asks where he learned to fight. With a smile, Ju-1 reveals that he was also an active soldier, just like him in the past. He warns his opponent to fight with everything he's got, so he won't be the first to lose today. The spectators comment, shocked that the candidate is managing to fight on equal terms. The protagonist just watches the combat with a serious and focused expression on his face. The two fighters exchange fierce blows, sending sparks flying with each impact of the swords. The proctor stops the fight and announces that time is up, resulting in a tie. The other candidates celebrate the incredible feat of managing to tie with a soldier. The officials comment that Ju-1 is indeed an impressive candidate, as expected. Next, the proctor calls Yi-sun Sin to be the last one to fight in that phase of the exam. The officials remember that he placed second, but took the lead in the fifth phase. One of them praises the young man for coming so far, but doubts he can beat an experienced soldier. He expects the young man to lose the lead, but wants to see how long he can last. The proctor calls soldier number 7 to be the protagonist's opponent in the arena. A colleague wishes him good luck, and the soldier replies not to worry about a brat. Suddenly, another soldier places a hand on his colleague's shoulder and stops him from going. The man offers to fight in his place and tells his companion to go rest. Surprised, the soldier asks if the instructor is really going to fight against a rookie candidate. The proctor finds the request strange, but the man assures him he has a good reason for it. He lies, saying the boy got arrogant for being in first place and challenged them. The man says the unit's honor would be at stake if they lost or tied. The instructor agrees that they need to teach the young man a lesson about arrogance from the start. With hatred in his eyes, the man decides he will fight personally to teach the rookie. The proctor authorizes the switch, and the fight between the instructor and the protagonist is about to begin. Before fighting, the soldier warns that he won't go easy and that he's not responsible for what happens. The instructor says he will show just how dangerous arrogance can be in practice. Confused, the protagonist wonders what the man is talking about and who was the arrogant one. The scene cuts to a flashback in a bustling village with several stalls and people. A fortune teller shakes a jar with sticks and shouts magic words to read a fortune. He picks one of the wooden sticks to begin predicting his client's future. A curious man approaches and eagerly asks what his fortune said. The fortune teller analyzes the stick and begins to talk about hexagrams and very confusing things. Annoyed, the client asks him to stop beating around the bush and just say what it means. In simple terms, the man reveals that the client will triumph in the end and be approved. The young man complains that all fortune tellers say the same thing and questions his ability. He wonders if he's been fooled his whole life, and the others tell him to get out of there. Tired of the noise, the fortune teller ends his work for the day and decides to leave. People complain about his attitude, and he replies that it's strange for the same fortune to appear. Away from the commotion, the man walks with a serious and thoughtful expression on his face. He breathes a sigh of relief, thinking that for a moment, he thought he would be found out by everyone. Counting the coins, he says he did it to pass the time and ended up making a good profit. The fake fortune teller hopes that his brother Sun Sin is doing well in the exam. Back in the arena, the instructor charges forward with a powerful attack toward the protagonist. The young warrior prepares himself and manages to block the blow with his wooden sword. The two exchange fierce blows, and the young man feels the experienced soldier's strength. Even though it's a training sword, the hero feels as if he's being hit by iron. The instructor warns that he won't give his opponent any chance to counterattack. With a sequence of blows, the soldier forces the young man to retreat and defend nonstop. The protagonist uses his sword to block a blow that would have passed close to his face. The soldier comments that the young man is lasting longer than he initially imagined. Even at a disadvantage, the young man continues to defend against his adversary's attacks. With firm arms, he withstands the pressure and remains on his feet in front of the soldier. The instructor warns once again that he won't give the boy any opening for an attack. The officials wonder if that is really the exam leader, as he is being dominated. The other candidates think that sword fighting is too much for someone so young. With a confident smile, the former soldier watches the fight, satisfied with the result. Panting, the protagonist faces his opponent, who seems to be having fun with the fight. The soldier taunts the young man, asking if he's already tired just from defending. The hero realizes the soldier's attitude has been strange since the beginning of the fight. He understands that if he can't handle this, he has no right to dream of being an officer. With a determined look, the young man decides he needs to take control of the fight's pace. The instructor leaps to attack and tells the boy to give up if he's already lost his courage. Suddenly, the soldier's eyes widen, startled by something unexpected in the fight. The protagonist stares at his opponent with a cold and determined look, ready to turn the tables. The older soldier attacks with his sword, bringing it down with a super strong overhead swing. But the kid dodges real quick, and the two start trading a bunch of intense blows in the arena. Just then, the other competitors are shocked when they notice the kid's aura has changed. And with their swords locked, the two warriors stare each other down in the middle of the fight. The soldier gets ticked off and wonders where the kid got all this strength out of nowhere. Then our hero puts on a serious face and says he might not win, but he won't lose either. At that moment, the protagonist plants his feet firmly on the dirt ground to get ready for an attack. In a really swift move, the soldier does a lead sweep and manages to knock the young man down. The hero loses his balance and ends up falling flat on his back, feeling the impact of the fall. This gets the crowd all confused, wondering if you're allowed to kick in a sword, only fight. Meanwhile, the older guy grips his weapon tightly and gets ready to finish it. He stands over the fallen boy and raises his sword for the final blow. Just like that, the instructor shouts loudly and brings the weapon down with full force toward the young man. The young man's eyes go wide when he sees the piece of wood coming right at his face, but with a loud thud, the sword hits the dirt ground hard and kicks up dust. The other candidates panic, thinking the man tried to come down hard on the competitor. Then we see that the protagonist managed to turn his head just in time to dodge the attack. At that, his peers notice the warrior's insane reflexes to have escaped that blow. Right then, the judge raises his hand and announces that time is up, ending the official match. Soon, the officials start discussing the result, unsure about the final decision. The military leader says that using your feet is also a technique and gives the victory to the instructor. Hearing that, the newbies hear the word instructor and don't get why he was fighting in the test. The proctor in the middle of the arena announces loudly that candidate 310 has lost. The young warrior hangs his head with a very sad look, seemingly accepting defeat. However, the older guy interrupts the decision, confessing with embarrassment that he was the one who lost. The spectators are totally confused, not understanding why the soldier said he lost. The soldier then explains that the young man dodged his final attack the exact moment he fell. He recalls that right after dodging, the young warrior pointed the tip of his sword at him. The man admits that if they were real weapons, he would have been a goner. With great honor, the experienced soldier tells everyone that the newbie is the winner. The protagonist stares at his opponent in silence, looking surprised by his attitude. At this, the exam commander glances over to analyze the whole situation in the arena. After thinking for a bit, the official gives a smile and agrees with the soldier's explanation. Next, he changes his final decision and announces the young candidate's great victory. All the other guys raise their arms and celebrate the big win against a soldier. But from a distance, the ex-soldier watches everything with a very serious face, feeling an enormous pressure. The instructor praises the boy's courage and acknowledges that he didn't get first place by luck. He also gives some advice, saying that arrogance brings laziness and destroys warriors. The hero listens carefully and realizes the older guy is speaking with good intentions. Then, the soldier turns his back and says, there's one more thing he has to tell the young man. The soldier reminds him that he still needs to pass the other tests and tells the newbie to stay focused. That said, he hopes to meet the boy again and guarantees he won't lose next time. With a confident smile, the protagonist accepts the challenge, saying he'll be waiting for it. At that moment, the announcer calls the end of the first part of the exam and tells everyone to bow. Far from there, two kids are walking on cloud 9, saying their brother got first place. The disguised fortune teller smiles with joy, imagining the party his family would throw for this. But suddenly, a desperate man runs toward them, calling for the master fortune teller. The guy grabs the protagonist's brother's hands, thanking him profusely for the correct prediction on the exam. The fake master says goodbye to the client all nervously, while trying to get out of there quickly. Confused, the friend asks about the situation, and the young man tells him not to worry about the details. While they walk, the friend asks what he did in the exam, accusing the guy of reading fortunes. Elsewhere, we see a beautiful port with several wooden boats docked on the river. Just then, a young noble lady arrives at the place, followed closely by her servants. At that moment, she overhears some guys gossiping that the great warrior passed in first place. Hearing this, the servant excitedly comments that everyone in the region is only talking about the young master now. The men drink happily, celebrating that the old family's luck has finally changed. But an upset guy interrupts the party, saying he only passed the first phase. He warns that without money or powerful connections, the young man will end up in a useless position in the end. Hearing that, the noblewoman and her servant look at the old man, totally confused by the conversation. The jealous guy takes a sip of his drink, asks if the young hero has that kind of support. Soon, one of the guys defends the boy, remembering that one of his uncles held a high position. However, the man warns that to get a good post nowadays, you need real connections. The villagers get scared when they realize he's talking about the highest authorities in the country. The upset man continues, explaining about the terrible punishments for treason that happened before. He reveals that dozens of scholars were dealt with and the entire region was demoted. Angrily, the guy claims that the total control of that ruling clan is a curse on the people. At this, the others tell him to shut up and flee, afraid of getting into trouble. The servant observes the scene and warns her lady that the man is in serious danger, but the noblewoman just replies that if no one does anything, the world will never truly change. Next, the scene cuts to a huge house where a young servant is sweeping the dirt yard. Inside the room, the young warrior is focused on writing a text while his brother eats casually. The young man confesses he feels bad eating alone and asks what the older one is writing. At that, the fake fortune teller turns around with the paper in his hand and says he needs to ask a serious favor. With a smooth motion, he hands the mysterious letter directly to the protagonist. The older brother tells the warrior to deliver that message to a prince's house in the capital. He also warns that the delivery must be personal and the sender's identity kept hidden. The hero stares at the envelope, confused, and notices this has nothing to do with his exam. But his brother refuses to explain the details now, because he himself isn't sure of everything. The fake master just says something mysterious about trying royal snacks at 16. Hearing this, the protagonist gets even more lost, not understanding a single thing about the conversation. Then, the fortune teller brother reveals that his brother has one more secret mission in the capital. With a very serious look, he asks the young warrior to look for news about a certain person. The story then takes us to another giant property with enormous stone and wood walls. Inside, we see the young noblewoman kneeling politely, greeting her elderly father. The man asks about her grandfather's health, and the girl replies that he seems to be getting better. She says her mother will be home soon and tells the old man to stop worrying so much. At this, the gentleman hides his concern and tells his daughter to go rest right after her trip. But before leaving, the young woman asks if it's true that a counselor was a colleague of his. The father confirms the old story and asks why the girl is curious about the guy. She states that they must be close, and the old man agrees, but still finds the question strange. With a smile, the girl approaches from behind and starts massaging her father's shoulders. Knowing his daughter well, the gentleman says she can ask for whatever she wants without beating around the bush. The noblewoman pretends to be innocent, saying she just wanted to give a massage, but might ask for something in the future. Time then moves forward to the 3rd month of the lunar calendar, with a beautiful, clear blue sky. The scene cuts to the giant military training office, located in the center of the capital. In the large courtyard, dozens of candidates are sitting on the ground, waiting for the test to begin. In the middle of the crowd, the young protagonist waits for his moment with a serious and focused look. In a covered area, 3 official examiners wait, seated behind a table. Just then, one of the younger guys glances to the side and asks the leader when the test will start. With a look of authority, the minister gives the order to begin the new tests at once. The examiner on the stage asks the other officials to bring the topic for that important test. At this, one of the men in green takes the paper and announces he will reveal the big challenge. Then the guy opens the paper in front of everyone, revealing the surprise theme of that exam. This leaves the candidates confused. Hearing the crowd's noise without understanding anything, the challenge asks how they can make more firearms if the country has no copper. At this moment, one of the young men understands that the main problem is the huge lack of the metal. He figures the most obvious answer would be to melt down temple bells to make weapons. But the protagonist realizes that answer would be way too easy for such a tough test. The hero concludes there must be a big problem preventing them from using the temple bells. Then we see the country's king himself sitting on his throne, listening to his ministers. The king reads a document and asks, outraged, who gave the terrible idea of melting bells. The counselor begs on his knees for the leader to approve the request and solve the weapon shortage. However, the king shouts with great anger, saying he will never let them destroy sacred items. Based on this, the young warrior deduces that the real solution can't involve using the bells. Meanwhile, the other competitors start writing their answers in a big hurry. They all dedicate themselves fully to delivering the best proposal in that document. After a long time, the proctor shouts loudly, announcing that the time for the test is over. Then the official tells everyone to hand in their answer sheets to the supervisors. Without a second thought, our protagonist hands his rolled-up test to the proctor. Later, the exam leaders begin to carefully evaluate all the papers they collected. One of them smiles excitedly, suggesting that candidate 17 should get first place. But the goateed leader disagrees with the idea, saying that text 29 is the best. Hearing this, his colleague is shocked, asking how he can support such an unrealistic idea. The wise man defends the proposal to use the country's abundant iron to make the muskets. But the examiner is very doubtful that these foreign weapons can surpass the national ones. The counselor reveals that he has already analyzed a musket up close and noted its firepower. Even so, the guy warns that you can't trust a kid who has never seen the weapon in his life. So the main minister orders a soldier to bring a musket from the military arsenal right now. The others are surprised by the request as the minister calls for candidate 29. At that moment, the hero of the story stands up and calmly says that he is that number. The leader tells the boy to state his full name, and the young man introduces himself with great pride. At this, the examiner warns that he will be severely punished if his proposal is a lie. Suddenly, a beautiful wood and metal musket is placed in the courtyard with its accessories. The young warrior stares at the foreign equipment on the table with a very calm expression. The scene cuts to show a wooden target positioned far away in the field. The examiner taunts the young man, telling him to shoot to prove he really knows the weapon. The man smiles, thinking it's impossible for a young man from the countryside to know how to use that object. But the protagonist laughs internally, since his body is young but his mind is very old. The young man gives a slight smile, remembering that in his past, he fired this weapon a lot. Once again, the military leader authorizes the start of the test, telling the boy to take the shot. Then we are taken to a memory from the future, where an old blacksmith receives a visitor. The older hero hands weapon blueprints to the artisan and asks him to use only steel. The white-haired man analyzes the drawings and says he can manufacture that item. With a fierce look, the great general warns that the country's fate depends on its success. Later, the blacksmith goes to the porch, announcing that he has finally finished his work. But upon testing the equipment, the warrior leader orders him to reduce the weight and adjust the trigger. Over several weeks, various changes were made to improve the weapon's efficiency, until one day, the general praises the artisan's excellent work, celebrating the result. Back in the present, the examiner yells, demanding the boy shoot at once. Snapping out of his thoughts, the protagonist places his hand firmly on the musket. With that, the young man grabs a long rod and starts cleaning the weapon's barrel with ease. Next, the hero carefully pours the gunpowder right inside the equipment. Then he takes a single metal ball and places it at the tip of the wooden barrel. Then the warrior pushes in a piece of paper and adds more powder to the side compartment. Seeing this, the old men are completely shocked to see the boy loading everything correctly. At that moment, the young man attaches the lit fuse to the weapon and blows on the small flame with precision. After finishing loading, the warrior takes a deep breath and points the barrel toward the target. But the proctor starts to sweat, imagining that this kid really knows how to shoot, and then a loud bang echoes through the air as the equipment fires with great force. The two instructors are left with their mouths wide open, hearing that deafening shot in the courtyard. At this, all the other candidates break into a cold sweat, unable to believe the young man's talent. In that instant, the small metal ball flies through the air, cutting through the wind at high speed. With a very strong impact, the projectile hits the wooden target right in the center. Surprised, the examiner raises a trembling finger and orders a guard to check the hole in the target. Our hero calmly lowers the musket, while the soldier runs to the wall. Then the official shouts loudly, announcing that the shot went completely through the wood. The scene focuses on the perfect damage, revealing that the back wall was also heavily damaged. Seeing this, the wise man comments, sweating, that this weapon's destructive power is insane. But the stubborn guy tries to downplay the achievement, saying the slow reload is a bad flaw. To this, the counselor replies that this weapon would strengthen the army and asks why not. Annoyed, the man yells, asking if he needs to spell out the real reason for this. Hearing those rude words, the good old man gets confused and asks for more explanation. The corrupt leader reveals that the country's master would be upset if the boy placed first. The wise man closes his eyes sadly, realizing the result was bought before the test. Next, the narrator announces that the military phase is over and the results will be out in 7 days. With that, the enormous red gates of the arena begin to open slowly, creaking. At this, the families outside are happy and start looking for their children in the crowd. A smiling gentleman receives his son, asking if the young man managed to pass the challenge. But the young man answers sadly, thinking he failed because the few spots are very competitive. The corrupt old man laughs, saying he paid a hefty bribe to secure his son's spot. Meanwhile, our protagonist's charlatan friend is on his tiptoes, searching for him. Suddenly, the man disguised as a noble breaks into a huge smile upon seeing someone from afar, and then he raises his arm, waving non-stop to get the young warrior's attention. The young man greets his friend, asking with a worried tone if our dear hero failed to test. The calm boy replies that he did well, but stands with his arms crossed, finding everything very strange. Just then, a rich kid approaches with a mocking tone, greeting the hero with spite. The annoying rich kid introduces himself, saying they saw each other in the first exam at the beginning. The story shows a beautiful top-down view of the city, covered in old clay-tiled roofs. Next, the three young men sit together around a table at a bar to drink and talk. The rich kid tries to keep up his act and confesses that the hero's aim was simply brilliant. And then the protagonist decides to ask in a friendly way if the jerk did well on the test. The rich kid lies, saying he has a high score and is fully confident he will pass. Filled with envy, the rival demands to know where a useless poor boy learned to use a weapon like that. At that moment, the fake charlatan steps in, telling the pretty boy to be less nosy. Furious, the elite boy raises his voice, looking for a fight, telling the friend to shut up. The rich kid humiliates the poor one, calling the young man a commoner and saying he doesn't belong there. However, the young warrior's face darkens, scaring the rich kid and asking what he was going to do. After that super tense moment, time passes and night falls over the capital. While walking down the street, the fake fortune teller complains a lot, fuming with anger at the rich kid. Curious, the friend asks about the rich kid's identity, and the hero replies that they fought before. At this, the hero changes the subject, wanting to confirm if his friend's investigation was successful. The fake master confirms it, saying that a certain genius is studying for the civil exam. Hearing this, the young warrior announces that they will climb that mountain early tomorrow morning. During the night, the colleague asks if this mysterious young man is really a great genius. The charlatan confesses he would love to meet such an incredible and famous person. But suddenly, we see a mysterious man spying on the two from the shadows of an alley. Well before dawn, the two adventurers walk through a dark and dense forest. The fake fortune teller wonders if they are really on the right path to the hideout. At this, the warrior comments that the climb is difficult, but the cabin must be very close. At that moment, the hero points ahead, revealing a small, lit house in the woods. The simple wooden cabin is very isolated in the middle of that immense, empty forest. Then the disguised colleague walks ahead, while the protagonist stays a little behind. Suddenly, the young fighter stops walking when he hears the sound of birds in the trees. With a slight smile, the young man looks up and notices a small nest full of chicks. But a masked attacker jumps from the trees and goes after the warrior with a sharp blade. The scene fades to black, revealing the title card for another incredible chapter. Returning to the fight, the hero ducks down real fast. Dodging the dangerous blow, the ninja lands on the dirt ground and praises the young fighter's great reflexes in the woods. With a very serious face, the protagonist faces the enemy, wanting to know who he is. However, the criminal ignores the question and spins his body quickly to deliver a kick. The hero raises his arm, blocking the enemy's heavy kick with incredible precision. At this, the great force of the impact makes the young warrior slide back on the dirty ground. He plants his feet on the ground and keeps his guard up to withstand the attack. The bandit praises the boy's speed, noting that his defense was very quick. The hero lowers his arms and asks if someone paid the ninja to commit that act, but the masked man doesn't want to give answers and gets into a fighting stance, ready to brawl. At this, the young fighter gets very angry, completely losing his patience. He clenches his fists tightly and walks toward the enemy with a frightening look. The protagonist says he doesn't need to know the boss's name if the bandit wants to keep quiet. At that moment, the hero points his finger and states that the ninja will fail his mission badly. Annoyed by the taunt, the guy charges forward, tearing up the ground with his boots. The mercenary attacks using his blade at high speed, cutting through the air around him. He moves quickly and says he has the power to decide who makes it out of this fight. The criminal extends his arm, trying to pierce the boy with a very direct strike. However, the masked villain's eyes go wide, shocked by the warrior's reaction. The hero grabs the enemy's wrist in mid-air and blocks the blow with his bare hands. With a beautiful move, the young man uses his rival's strength and throws the guy hard to the ground. The bandit hits the dirt ground violently, raising a lot of dust after the fall. The man is left lying on his back, not understanding anything, and feeling a lot of pain from the impact. At this, the ninja tries to prop himself up on his arms, admitting he didn't expect this counterattack. The protagonist, with his arms crossed, suggests the man run away, pretending nothing happened, but the stubborn masked man turns his head and asks if the boy feels sorry for him now. The hero warns that the villain should be begging for his life and stop talking nonsense. Then the assassin readies his blade, guaranteeing the fight only ends when one of them goes down. Suddenly, the dangerous enemy's eyes go wide as he feels something hit his head. We see that a flying rock hits the masked man's forehead with considerable force. Bleeding badly, the guy glares at the young man, thinking he used dirty tricks in the fight. However, The young fighter is completely confused and swears he didn't throw any rock. Then we see the disguised friend holding rocks, wanting to defend our protagonist. The hero's ally approaches with an acquaintance and asks if the young warrior is okay. The young warrior smiles in surprise, recognizing the man and calling him dear brother. With a slight smile, the young man faces the masked ninja in the middle of the dark forest. At this, the villain realizes he took too long and ended up failing his attack mission badly, so the mercenary jumps back and warns that the two will face each other again in the future. The disguised friend holds a rock in his hand and asks if the coward is running from the fight. Without a second thought, he prepares to throw the rock with great force at his rival, but the protagonist extends his arm right away, telling his friend to let the enemy escape. The ally is confused, wanting to know the reason for this, since the guy tried to attack them. The young fighter says they will see each other again, and focuses on the sage, who just arrived. The older man suggests they all go up to the cabin, instead of standing around in the woods. With that, our protagonist agrees with the idea, giving a beautiful, very calm smile. The scene cuts to the lit wooden house, where the friend waits on the porch outside. Inside, the old master serves some good tea and asks if the young man did well on the military exam. The sage explains that he heard about the boy's progress and concluded he would take the second test. At this, he confesses he doesn't understand why the boy chose the armed forces instead of the civil service. The young warrior drinks his tea, saying he simply doesn't have the talent to be an official, but the sage complains, thinking that's a lie, and demands to know the real reason. Then the young man gives a sideways smile, saying the military decision was a direct order from the heavens. Hearing this exaggerated answer, the sage bursts out laughing, thinking the boy is a joker. On the dark porch, the protagonist's ally hears the loud laughter coming from inside. With a nice smile, the fake fortune teller notices that their friendship is really very strong. In the room, the man suddenly gets serious, wanting to know why the hero was looking for him. The older man looks at the young one, saying his expression reveals a worry. The young man gives a friendly wink and praises his dear brother's incredible perception. At this, the warrior adopts a serious look, stating that he carries a great doubt in his heart. Seeing the change in tone, the homeowner gets curious and asks the fighter to speak up. The story then shows us a beautiful view of the enormous blue mountain in the middle of the night. After the long talk, the men gather in the dirt yard for a friendly farewell. The young fighter wishes his friend good luck on the test, and the sage thanks him for the sincere support. The homeowner assures him that he will soon send an answer to the hero's difficult question. With that, the hero apologizes, thinking he bothered his partner with that matter. Then the two adventurers start walking, leaving the small, rustic cabin behind. At this moment, we are taken back to the secret and deep conversation inside the room. The hero looks at his friend, wanting to know if he truly understands the meaning of the old text. The master explains that the message is about overthrowing any king who harms the nation. But suddenly, the homeowner's eyes go wide, understanding the young warrior's idea. The traveler asks without any fear if the master agrees with that rebellious thought. Completely in shock, the good gentleman sweats and stammers, unable to give an answer. Back in the present, the man thinks to himself, finding the hero's questions quite dangerous. With a very serious face, he tries to understand his partner's real reasons for doing this. Far from there, the two companions walk peacefully in the middle of the enormous, lifeless forest. On the journey, the young man in blue surprises his colleague by suddenly asking what his dream is. The fake fortune teller raises an eyebrow, not understanding the origin of such a random topic. The hero looks at the dirt road, assuring his ally that he has already thought about the future he wants. Sadly, the colleague sighs and laments that people without good birth can't have ambitions. He explains that a simple illegitimate son never gets ahead in life, even if he studies hard. But the warrior disagrees with that sad view, saying that everyone can fight for something. With a very firm look, the young fighter promises to make his friend's wishes come true without fail. The leader speaks the words with great force as a cold wind cuts through the environment. Time moves forward a few months, revealing the large walls of a military post in the snow. Atop the wall, 2 guards are freezing, complaining that the snow won't stop falling. The younger soldier rubs his hands, shivering badly, and wishing the wind would calm down soon. Then we see 2 other warriors down, below, starting a patrol with a little dog. The guard with the dog complains about the mission in this weather, but knows the bosses would complain. Then his older partner tells the young man to shut up, saying they can hear everything. With that, the 2 soldiers continue their round, walking with difficulty in the blizzard. At this, the older one calls to the guards on the wall and asks them to check the wooden fence. The warrior on the wall confirms the request with a hand signal, and the patrol colleagues move on. The heavy boots sink into the thick snow, making a muffled sound with each step. Along the way, the young man asks about an officer, but finds out his trip was canceled. The old man laments, missing his wife, and saying it's been almost 3 months since he saw her. With a super tired look, he grumbles that this blizzard needs to end soon so he can go. But suddenly, the younger partner gets a scare and points to a direction nearby. The old man looks at the spot and notices a giant breach in the structure of wooden stakes. At that moment, the patrol leader tells the rookie to stay put and says he'll check it out. Then the fluffy dog starts barking a lot without stopping, warning that something is wrong. Frightened by the noise, the old soldier tells the animal to shut up, sweating nervously. He pulls the leash hard, getting closer and saying there's nothing on the ground. Annoyed, the guy complains, telling the dog to stop, thinking the animal ate something rotten. But the stubborn animal keeps barking and looking at a pile of snow that is moving. At this, the warrior's eyes go wide, completely in shock, and he asks what that is. And then 2 dangerous enemy warriors jump out of the snow with blades to attack. Desperate, the old soldier draws his heavy sword, shouting that it's a trap. He warns with all his breath that the barbarians have invaded and tells his allies to react. But at that exact moment, a long enemy arrow cuts through the cold air, flying very fast. The attack hits the poor soldier right in the chest, knocking him down hard onto the snowy ground. Right after, another barbarian archer fires without mercy and hits the poor little dog. Seeing his partners fall, the young rookie turns his back and runs for his life. The young man runs crying towards the wall, begging the soldiers to attack for goodness sake. But the escape ends quickly when 2 arrows hit his back, knocking him down hard. From above, the 2 guards on the wall watch the terrible scene, sweating with terror. A giant horde of enemies emerges from the blizzard, running with hatred and seeking revenge. Without wasting time, one of the guards grabs an alert horn and blows the danger warning. The deep sound echoes throughout the military camp, waking the warriors for the emergency. Quickly, a large group of armed soldiers runs to the courtyard, ready for combat. On the wall, experienced archers ready their bows and fire a shower of arrows. The warriors fire non-stop, calling the barbarians wretches while they defend. However, the arrows end up hitting the large shields, protecting the enemies squarely. The guards are shocked and understand that the barbarians used urine to trick the dogs. The invaders continue to advance dangerously, hidden behind barriers with spikes. Soon, the invasion reaches the wall, and a soldier defends a blow but receives a counter-attack. Desperate, the base's great leader points and orders his archers to fire with everything they've got. The commander gets very annoyed, staring at the snow, and asks if there are only a few enemies. But his assistant trembles from head to toe and warns in terror that the problem is bigger. Hearing this, the general freezes, feeling a chill down his spine as he notices something terrifying. Dozens of wild horses run in the snow, making a sound that shakes the whole ground. A giant enemy cavalry emerges from the blizzard, riding with great hatred and weapons. Their leader raises his heavy sword and demands they all be taken down to avenge his tribe. Next, the fierce warriors aim their bows and fire a shower of arrows. The deadly volley hits the soldiers on the wall, injuring all the poor souls. Desperate, the general shouts for the soldiers not to retreat and orders a full counter-attack. But suddenly, a swift arrow flies through the blizzard and hits the leader squarely in the chest. With the impact, the man falls violently into the thick snow, frightening all the guards. At this, one of the archers on the wall stops firing and notices something strange far away. Quickly, he turns his head, completely surprised as he realizes something shocking. The other guard companions also get confused, not understanding anything about the scene. At that moment, an officer arrives angrily and tells the archers to focus on the battle. However, the guard points ahead, warning that something very bizarre is happening. Hearing that, the superior runs along the wall, wanting to know the reason for the distraction. Then the three men look at the battlefield, hearing a giant war cry. The view focuses on the frozen horizon, showing a plain covered in dense snow. Just then, the storm clears, revealing a mysterious lone rider on top of the hill. Suddenly, a long arrow tears through the cold winds, flying at an insane speed. The surprise attack hits one of the invaders right in the face, knocking him off his horse instantly. Seeing their ally get hit, the terrified barbarians wonder how the attack came from so far away. Completely in shock, the enemies praise the lethal precision of that rider, and soon we see that the elite shooter is none other than our young hero with a beautiful bow. Without losing a second, the fearless rider advances steadily down the hill. With a super confident smile, the young man shouts for his allies to follow him into the fight. With that, the camera pans out, revealing a giant cavalry advancing behind the protagonist. On the wall, the guards are super relieved, noticing that the squadron is a reinforcement. The archer wonders how help arrived so quickly, and the commander doesn't have an answer. Furious with the interruption, the enemy leader orders his warriors to attack the new group. Then a large horde of invaders runs through the snow, vowing to crush the new rivals. At that exact moment, the two gigantic forces clash head-on, kicking up a lot of snow. Right in the middle of the confusion, the protagonist uses his swift sword and strikes a rival. Suddenly, an angry warrior advances, asking if the hero was the guy with the arrows. The barbarian raises his heavy blade in the air, wanting to punish the young man for his friend's fall. With great anger, the guy makes a frontal strike, but the hero deflects the attack with his sword. Keeping his cool, the rider in blue slides the enemy blade, showing control in the fight. Taking advantage of the opening, the young fighter makes a quick counter-attack, hitting the villain's shoulder. With the strong blow, the mercenary loses his balance and is left confused by the trick. Ignoring the defeated enemy, the powerful protagonist spins his weapon and advances on the field. The squadron leader raises his voice, saying the invader have just gone to a very bad place. With a frightening look, the boy points his weapon, swearing that no one from the tribe will leave here standing. But a giant brute advances in the snow and says those threats are a joke. The battlefield turns into chaos, with soldiers trading brutal blows from all sides. In the middle of the conflict, a brave warrior raises his sword and orders a new formation. At this, 3 soldiers with long spears gather and adopt a strong defensive stance. The giant squadron attacks in a synchronized manner, creating an impossible barrier to break through. Seeing the guards' synchrony, the mercenaries break into a cold sweat and lose their courage in the face of such power. Returning the focus, our traveler in blue rides to meet that brute. With his face consumed by hatred, the big guy makes a cut and extends his blade at high speed. But using incredible agility, the protagonist leans back on his horse and dodges. The hatted rival's eyes go wide, unable to believe the boy's reflexes. In a quick move, the hero takes advantage of the dodge to land a strong kick on the guy's horse. Next, the young warrior presses his advantage and comes down with an overhead strike. The immense force of the clash makes the barbarian retreat, feeling his whole body tremble. With his opponent off balance, the squadron leader extends his arm and delivers a frontal attack. The large brute suffers the strong impact and falls onto the animal's back, defeated. The enormous barbarian falls into the thick snow, completely shocked by the sudden blow. At this, the big guy puts his hand on his chest, feeling immense pain and losing all his air. Taking advantage of the opening, the fearless hero leaps from his horse, flying with great agility. With that, the young warrior lands an incredibly powerful flying kick to the enemy's chest. The strong impact sends the brute flying, landing on his back in the snow with great force. Lying on the cold ground, the mercenary lets out a loud groan, and can't take the pain anymore. But even injured, the guy refuses to lose and firmly grabs his sword on the ground. Consumed by a blind rage, the villain gets up, yelling that he's going to tear his rival to pieces. However, upon looking forward, the big guy's expression changes instantly, revealing total terror. All because the young man in the hat just stares at his rival, holding his sharp blade. Completely sweaty, the invader praises the great strength of that squadron of soldiers. Then, without a second thought, the mercenary stomps firmly in the snow and advances with great anger. The crazy man runs with great hatred, swearing he'll make a necklace out of his opponent's teeth. With a sadistic look, the brute delivers a brutal overhead blow, wanting to finish him. But using his great reflexes, the protagonist makes a quick jump back and dodges. The heavy blade hits the frozen ground, creating a giant shockwave through the air. Right after, the incredible fighter's black boots touch the snowy ground, stopping him. Without losing rhythm, the traveler in blue uses a burst of speed and dashes toward his rival. With frightening speed, our hero lands a beautiful punch to the big guy's stomach. The boy's immense physical strength makes the enemy double over and lose the air from his lungs. Completely without a reaction, the invading warrior collapses, falling face first into the snow. Kneeling on the cold ground, the defeated brute ends up coughing up a lot of blood. At that exact moment, the victorious swordsman points his weapon at the villain's forehead. The mercenary freezes from head to toe, staring at the squadron leader with terror. In a very serious tone, the young man says all the enemies have fallen and tells him to surrender. With no other choice, the huge man swallows hard and understands that his tribe has lost. As the camera pans out, we see the immense number of warriors fallen on the ice. Soon, the base's soldiers finish the job and tie up all the barbarians who survived. Then a beautiful scene transition occurs, revealing a sunrise in the mountains. The warm morning light illuminates a small, isolated village covered in snow. In that calm environment, a cute white bunny munches on its little meal peacefully. But suddenly, the peace is completely shattered when a swift arrow tears through the winds. Using its instincts, the animal makes a strong leap and escapes the deadly attack that hits the ground. Coming out from among the trees, a young hunter runs in frustration and laments the miss. The agile young man continues the chase and complains that the prey in the region is fast. Tired of the chase, the man lowers his warm hood, revealing tied-up hair. At this, the archer sighs and asks how many animals they've let escape, and hears a sound. Quickly, the curious boy turns his head, trying to understand what caused the noise. His gaze wanders through the frozen grove, carefully searching for the source of the sound. And soon his brown eyes go completely wide as he focuses on a creature in the landscape. A giant and fierce wild boar with dark fur walks peacefully through the forest. The young man's heart races with excitement, and he breaks into a smile upon finding such good prey. The hunter licks his lips, drooling for a piece of meat, and celebrates his great luck. Without making a sound, the focused guy takes short steps in the snow, wearing straw shoes. Carefully, the young archer approaches stealthily and hides behind a pine tree. Hidden from the large animal's view, the boy takes a deep breath and adjusts his posture. Next, he gently reaches his hand back and pulls a sharp arrow from his quiver. Focused on not missing, the lethal archer knocks the ammunition and draws the bowstring with force. He completely focuses his hunter's gaze and masterfully calculates the trajectory. The camera focuses closely on the young man's determined expression, waiting for the moment to take down the prey. In the past, the protagonist's master teaches him an archery technique called the spiral shot. He explains that the trick is to release the arrow while twisting the wrist with the string drawn. The older warrior warns that this increases accuracy, but can go wrong without practice. Back in the present, we see the young archer focusing his sharp gaze while drawing the string. Our hero is hunting in the snowy forest and aims at a large wild boar, but at that exact moment, he steps hard on the snow, making a sound that breaks the silence. At this, the animal notices the hunter's presence and turns its eyes, startled by the sound. Without wasting time, the archer releases the bowstring using his master's technique. Sensing the danger, the wild pig turns its back and starts running desperately. However, the shot travels through the cold air, cutting through the winds at an impressive speed. And then the arrow hits the animal's back squarely with a very accurate force. Even wounded, the stubborn pig continues to flee across the plain, screaming in pain without stopping. Annoyed by the miss, the boy doesn't give up and pulls another piece of ammunition for a new attack. He extends his arm firmly and fires at the target, which is getting farther and farther away. The second attack hits the animal's body again, causing a strong impact on its back. With the blow, the boar lets out a giant grunt, feeling the weight of the deadly hunt. But surprisingly, the brute creature refuses to go down and continues its desperate escape. Seeing this, the young hunter gets completely frustrated and yells, annoyed by the target's escape. Determined not to lose his dinner, he grabs the bow desperately and pulls the string with all his might. And in a final effort, the boy twists his wrist hard and fires the third arrow into the air. The deadly projectile travels in a perfect line, showing the evolution of the incredible archer. At this, the memory ends, and we see a guard giving a kick and ordering a prisoner to sit. With the humiliating impact, the enemy soldier falls on his back in the snow and feels the defeat. We then see several captured mercenaries on their knees before the patrol. Tied up, the leader of the invaders laments the easy defeat and is confused as to how they lost so quickly. At that moment, our fearless protagonist approaches and faces the villains with a serious look. The warrior boy listens to the old enemy's complaints and keeps his face calm. Then the hero says that the barbarians fell because they attacked foolishly and without preparation. He continues his lecture and explains the simple reason why the patrol won the fight. The warrior says they marched using combat formations made to crush them. Hearing these truths, the defeated guy's eyes go wide, and he is left completely speechless. However, even humiliated, the man lowers his head and tries to justify his tribe's fall. The stubborn prisoner claims that the mercenaries from his great village have never lost anything. But he praises the hero, confessing that they only fell because they fought against incredible soldiers. Not caring about the praise, the young leader turns his face and tells the guards to take the prisoners away. With that, the large army begins to march back, leaving the frozen plain behind. Elsewhere, we see a giant government base receiving shocking news. Inside, the big boss's jaw drops, unable to believe the enemy base is gone. With that, two officials confirm the great victory to their boss, who listens from his throne. The white-bearded counselor remembers that last fall they were attacked by bandits, but now about 30 invaders have crossed the frozen river, seeking revenge for the conflict. At this, he explains that the Allied base was almost being destroyed by the rival mercenaries. Then the official next to him praises the arrival of the great hero who saved the entire squadron. Hearing this beautiful account, the region's leader becomes completely serious and thoughtful. The man in the hat continues reading the scroll and reports the end of 6 villains. In addition, 14 mercenaries were captured alive, along with the tribe's chief. Super excited, the counselor reports that the young warrior's reinforcements were barely injured. At that moment, the magistrate narrows his eyes, even more shocked by the feat. The chief questions in admiration how the enemy losses were so huge while their troops came out unscathed. With a big smile on his face, the reader of the paper extols the hero's extraordinary courage. Since the summer, the fearless warrior has been driving out all invaders from the area, and he was one of the only ones to bring great peace to those people who suffered so much. Placing a hand on his chin, the leader recalls the former commanders who defended the place. Quickly, his lackey scoffs and reveals that all the old guards were terrified. But unlike the others, this brave young warrior has a simply brilliant mind. And for talking too much, the guy ends up getting a good elbow to the ribs from his partner. Feeling the pain, the gossip gives a sheepish laugh and suggests informing the imperial court. Faced with that suggestion, the powerful leader in the hat considers the request with a heavy expression. However, he raises his hand, and besides, they first need to inform the region's generals. Having received the orders, the two subordinates bow and accept the request with respect. At this, a scene transition occurs, revealing the two suited men walking in the courtyard, walking side by side. The young man who read the report notices his friend's strange mood. Curious, the guy asks what the real reason for him looking that way would be. Hearing his partner, the old bearded man sighs heavily and lets out a breath, looking at the sky. In a downcast tone, the older man laments, saying his family's good life is over. Totally confused, his companion questions what on earth he could mean. Maintaining his serious posture, the man tells his colleague to use his head a little more. He imagines the invaders retreated only to gather forces and return with a larger troop. With that, the defense base would respond in kind, creating a giant and useless cycle of revenge. The bearded man says this insane pursuit will only end when one side gives up. However, he fears that the frequent battles will force the empire to send a brutal army, and he fears that if a major war breaks out, their entire village will be the first to suffer. Placing a hand on his chin, his faithful colleague finally understands his partner's concern. Glancing out of the corner of his eye, the pessimistic official asks if his line of reasoning is clear. With a wide smile, the talkative one confirms everything and decides to recall his friend's past. In the past, the old man's family had a lot of money before being exiled over a conflict, but using his old tricks, he got rich by trading illegally with the enemies. Because of this, the sly one figures that the fear of war is because of his trade route, and still with a sadistic little smile on his face, he asks if he made any mistake in his deduction. Hearing the truths, the corrupt man's face freezes, and he glares at his partner menacingly. Completely frightened by that fury, the gossip freezes from head to toe, fearing for his life. Being caught red-handed, the older man lets out another big, heavy sigh to relieve the stress. Turning his face, the counselor tells his friend to forget about the matter and walks away. But right after, the suited man stops walking, completely paralyzed in the courtyard. Changing his attitude, the man flashes a wicked smile and hatches a perverse plan in his mind. And looking at the sun, he swears that with a little effort, there will always be a solution. Elsewhere, a vast white landscape appears, covered by a thick layer of snow. Then we are introduced to a military camp near the Great Yellow River in winter. Inside the walls, some soldiers patrol the area, walking calmly through the snow. The pair of guards continues their usual round, passing by the wooden houses of the place. Inside one of the houses, a voice celebrates the capture of 14 and the end of 6 enemies. We see that the voice belongs to a commander, who praises Officer Yi for his incredible work. Commander Hyo-chin Sun says he has already informed the court and expects a reward for the young man. With a calm expression, our hatted hero thanks his superior for the kind words. But the commander says there's no need to thank him, as he's the one who should be praising. At this, the superior reveals that because of the young man's victories, he will also be promoted. Hearing that, the young warrior maintains his calm expression and lets out a slight smile. However, the chief suddenly changes the subject, saying there's something with a slightly bitter taste. At that statement, our protagonist's expression changes instantly and becomes more serious. The commander says the higher-ups are not at all happy with his victories. The hatted swordsman listens in silence and processes the unexpected information. At this, he reads an order from above about the use of force against the tribes of the Yellow River. The young officer continues to listen attentively, keeping his gaze focused on the chief. Then, with his eyes closed, the young man wonders who from the high command sent this order. Across the table, the commander looks at him with a serious gaze and a heavy expression. With a sharp look, our hero states that whoever it is, they have misjudged the situation. He then completes his thought and says firmly that their decision is wrong. The young man explains that the Jurchens do not fear the kingdom's authority and cross the border to hunt. He recalls that last fall, the barbarians invaded villages, causing harm and looting the people. In response, the local troops attacked and displayed the bodies to show their power. And yet, the barbarians return seeking revenge and attack the camp again. But before the young man can continue, his chief raises a hand, asking him to stop. The commander then asks if the young warrior thinks he doesn't know all that. He explains that the higher Ups don't want to fight with the Jurchens while he is in command. However, the swordsman warns with a serious look that the superior's wish will not come true. Faced with that firm response, the commander remains silent, not knowing what to say to the young man. The young man says the superiors want peace, but he knows the enemies will not give up. Surprised by the statement, the commander questions if the barbarians will really attack again. With a simple nod, the young warrior confirms his superior's suspicion. He then predicts that a second enemy attack is near and will be larger than the last. Suspicious, the base chief demands to know what the young man is basing this on. The officer explains that the information came from the enemy prisoners, who are now captured. But his chief is very doubtful because, in the end, all enemies are just barbarians. However, the young man says the information matches his spies' reports exactly. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the chief asks when the young officer thinks the attack will happen. The young man explains that they always attack when the river freezes, so it will be before winter ends. With a hand on his chin, the superior becomes thoughtful, analyzing the whole new dangerous situation. Then he points a finger and suggests that the young warrior go confirm everything for himself. The hatted young man just listens to the chief's suggestion, maintaining his serious and attentive expression. The chief explains that as a simple commander, he cannot alert the court based on rumors. He continues, saying that if the warning is false, he will end up receiving a severe punishment. The young officer understands and reveals that he was already planning to form a group to investigate the area. Surprised by his attitude, the chief tells him to get ready to leave by tomorrow morning at the latest. The young man agrees with the order and then prepares to leave his great superior's room. With that, he turns his back and walks to the door, leaving the chief behind, watching. The older guy stares at the door, trying to understand what on earth just happened. But before leaving, the young man turns and says he has a request he's been thinking about for a while. With a curious look, the superior tells the young officer to say what's on his mind. The young man asks that the chief give orders, not suggestions, as that is how military law works. That unexpected statement catches the older official by surprise, leaving the man speechless. The shock of that statement echoes in the chief's mind, as he remains completely still, saying nothing. In his thoughts, the chief admits he always gives suggestions as if he were a general. Tired of the situation, the man lets out a long sigh, and the scene changes to outside. We then see the small village covered in snow, with some bare trees in the landscape. The camera focuses on the wooden buildings of the village, completely covered in winter snow. Inside, a young woman with braids tends to the fire to calmly prepare the day's meal. We are introduced to our hero's maid, a young woman who takes care of the house chores. Suddenly, the girl hears a familiar voice calling her and turns her head, startled. It was the hero who had returned, and the young woman greets him, saying he has finally returned. The young man looks to the side, as if smelling something different in the air. The girl flashes a big smile, getting ready to reveal the big surprise. Just then, a young man runs through the courtyard, shouting excitedly for his older brother's return. The man says it's a wild boar he hunted, and our hero is astonished by the news. He boasts that he was hunting when the animal attacked, and he hit it with an arrow. But the young woman scoffs, saying it's a nice story for someone who came back all scratched up. Not understanding at all, the young man asks where on earth he would have any scratches on his body. She points to his face and says the man's back is full of marks. The young man pushes her hand away and says he got hurt because he slipped while carrying the animal. He then clears his throat and swears that heaven and earth know he took down the prey. To prove it, he points to the animal's meat, which is drying, hanging outside. He brags that to take down an animal that size, his aim must be very good. With a proud smile, he jokes that he must have known how to shoot since he came out of the womb. With her arms crossed, the young woman tells the guy to stop being ridiculous with those stories, but he retorts that fish are born knowing how to swim, and nobody questions that. The trio continues their little argument. They're in the middle of the hero's snowy courtyard. The hunter turns his face to his older brother and waits for a supportive response. Our hero looks at his brother with a serious gaze and a very heavy expression on his face. The hunter turns his face back while the young woman remains with her arms crossed and annoyed. In a firm tone, the warrior tells his relative to come inside the house with him right now. At this, the scene changes to inside the residence, showing the end of the beautiful sunny day outside. Already inside the house, the officer asks why his brother insisted on following him to the border. He continues, explaining that he also dreams of becoming a great merchant and making a name for himself. The older brother warns that for that, he needs to learn foreign languages like Japanese. The aspiring merchant agrees and says he needs to know the languages to make a profit. Then the hero questions the young man's progress in the language books he gave him to study. With a drop of sweat running down, he confesses he only learned a little of the Chinese text. Without patience, the officer tells his relative to read aloud everything he remembers by heart. The young man begins to recite a passage about counting families and measuring the province's grains. But in the middle of the sentence, he stammers, and his brother slams his hand hard on the wooden table. The hunter gets a huge scare from the noise and is completely paralyzed with fear. With a very serious look, the warrior says that because of that mistake, he will punish his brother. He says the punishment will be to write while standing on one leg for 5 whole days. The officer says the training lasts 2 hours and is a standard exercise for his soldiers. Completely embarrassed, the young man complains that he is not a soldier and asks for a lighter punishment. With a cold look, the older brother says that if he doesn't want to, he can go back home. That direct response catches the hunter by surprise, leaving him shocked and speechless. Defeated, the young man agrees with his head down and accepts that he will have to do the training. The officer adds that the training stone will weigh 2 June, and the young woman will watch him. The young man lets out a long sigh of defeat, feeling his soul slowly leaving his body. A beautiful scene transition occurs, revealing a bright sunrise in the mountains. In the morning, our hero mounts his horse, and the maid wishes him a safe return. As soon as he leaves, the young woman turns and walks back inside the residence. Outside, the hunter begins his punishment and complains about his bad mood in the morning. The young woman then approaches, and the sweaty young man asks if his brother has already left. As soon as she confirms, the clever one throws the heavy stones hard onto the frozen ground. The hunter bends over, groaning in pain, and massages his legs, which can't take it anymore. But suddenly, the young man feels a strong blow on his back and lets out a scream of pure pain. Completely shocked, the young man turns his head back, trying to understand what that was. It was the young woman, who says she received orders to hit him without mercy if he tried to slack off. She points to a water clock and reminds him of what happens if he skips the training. Annoyed, the young man turns his face, grumbling that this can't be called training. With a smile on her face, the maid tells the man to get a move on and start exercising, but the young man flashes a malicious smile, saying he was already prepared for this situation. The young woman is confused by the sudden smile and asks why he has that look on his face. He says he has something to show the young woman, and that she will surely love to see it. The girl just stares at the man with an expression of complete confusion on her face. Far away, the hero and his troop travel through a dark landscape toward an enemy base. Seen from above, the small squadron walks in silence through the thick layer of snow. The group of scouts continues their long journey through the vast and empty territory. The camera focuses on our hero and his men, all wearing heavy fur coats for the cold. Under the starlight, the team climbs a snowy mountain with great difficulty and effort. The scene takes us to the northwest of the Amnok River, showing the frozen landscape of the place. The cold night wind sways the dry plants growing on the edge of the icy river. Hidden in the bushes, the officer and his men observe the enemy territory. Crouched in the vegetation, they analyze a small village on the other side of the field. One of the soldiers points to the leftmost cabin and says it's the spy's safe house. Our hero asks how many scouts are in the house, and the soldier replies that there's only one. The officer observes the village carefully and processes the information he just received. One of the soldiers calls a companion and asks the rest of the group to wait for new orders. The camera focuses on the small wooden cabin, with its roof covered by the night's snow. With agility, the pair jumps over the wooden fence and enters the house's grounds. They land carefully on the snowy ground, trying not to make any little noise in the place. The young man turns his head to the side, sensing a presence approaching very slowly. A man appears and says a secret password to confirm that he is the expected spy. He then reveals that he was already expecting their arrival, because he received a warning in the morning. The scene changes and shows the full moon shining brightly in the dark, starry night sky. Our hero questions if it's certain that the enemies are planning a major invasion. The spy confirms it, but says he couldn't find out the exact date they will depart. However, he believes the attack will happen by the middle of next month at the latest. With a curious look, the officer asks what led the spy to this conclusion. He explains that he heard it from the mate of a big shot, who commands about 30 villages in the area. The informant says he saw the chief ordering the blacksmiths to make many weapons. Our hero asks where this chief's base is and how many invaders he commands. While serving a drink, the spy reveals that the base is near a mountain. He describes the place as a village protected by mountains and surrounded by stakes. Inside live 70 families with a total of 200 men ready for battle. But the informant warns that the problem is not the tribe itself, but something much bigger. He reveals that the chief also requested troops and supplies from the lord he serves. With a hand on his chin, the officer concludes that the number of invaders will be very large. The spy estimates that more than 1,000 invaders will join this major military offensive. With wide eyes, the hero repeats the number 1,000, completely shocked by the info. The informant adds that the exact number will depend on how many soldiers they send. The young warrior remains silent with a drop of sweat running down his tense face. He remembers a saying that if 10,000 Jurchens gather, no one can stop them. The spy warns that if the kingdom doesn't gather troops in time, they will suffer a bad defeat. The spy reveals that the chief's name is Chal I-hap, and his clan is the famous Azen Gioro. With a surprised look, the young man repeats the clan's name, as if he had heard it before. The informant explains that this is the name of the great Khan of the Jurchen's clan, and he is a chief. Our hero remains silent and processes all this new, serious information. He remembers a man named Narasi introducing himself as the chief of the Jurchens. With a clever look, the officer wants to know if, among the descendants of that clan, there is a Nurhasi.